So, hello everyone. Welcome to today's session, Back to Basics, Data Governance in Amazon QuickSight. I am Salim Khan, a QuickSight Solution Architect at AWS. I also have my colleague Neeraj Kumar, who will be presenting with me today. So, as you see, we have a packed Genesis. We're doing a Back to Basics series now. We want to cover some of the other aspects of QuickSight too that is related to data governance. So, we'll give you a quick overview of QuickSight for folks who are new, understand how assets are in QuickSight. We go through some of the data asset creation process. We will cover row level and column level security, the permissions around data assets, then the multi-tenant architecture, when to use namespaces, shared folders, restricted folders, and how to do multi-tenancy in QuickSight. Then we cover some enhanced security features in QuickSight, which is how to use custom roles with data sources, trusted identity propagation, and everything else. And then towards the end, we will show you how you can use the different monitoring and optimization capabilities with some other services also along with QuickSight. And then towards the end, since we have a packed agenda, we'll go through the resources that you can leverage after the session. And then, as Maddie mentioned, you can post your questions within the chat. If you have time towards the end, we will cover some of them live. If not, please post it on the community, and then we will get back as soon as possible. So starting with an overview of QuickSight, for folks who are new, QuickSight enables BI for everyone in the organization that needs them. QuickSight is a unified BI service that delivers modern dashboards for interactive analytics. We also have pixel-perfect reports for agreed-upon formats like PDF and Excel. We can do embedded analytics for consumer insights directly in applications, and Q for asking questions in natural language. Organizations can consolidate and migrate away from maintaining multiple legacy BI systems for the different needs, thereby eliminating complexity. QuickSight is built with builders in mind. So whether you are a BI analyst or a developer, we enable you to get your analysis done and delivered anywhere quickly and efficiently. QuickSight is purpose-built on a serverless architecture, right? So that scales efficiently and instantly to tens, thousands, even millions of users. With no software or servers to install or manage, customers can lower costs by eliminating investments in unnecessary resources. And with usage-based pricing, customers reduce spend by simply paying for what they need, no long-term contracts or hidden costs for extra servers. So this is QuickSight in a nutshell. Okay. Now starting with user management. So when you sign up for QuickSight, we basically have three basic roles within QuickSight. I'll bring all those together on the screen so that we can see it. We start with the most basic role, which is the reader. For a reader can interact with the dashboards. You can ask questions in natural language. You can save bookmarks, configure, receive emails. We just highlighted a few of them over here. They have much more capabilities, but users are end user personas, right? Most accounts will have thousands of users, which are your readers. Then moving on to the builders, which are our authors within the organization. The authors can basically create data sources, data sets. They can create the analysis. And then once the analysis is ready, you can actually publish the dashboard and then share it with your end users, which is the readers or other authors. And then we have the admins who are responsible for managing QuickSight. They can manage storage, they can manage users and all the other resources, along with being able to configure the different authentication mechanisms. So these are our three basic roles as of today. And then what we have is, along with these three basic roles, if you add the Amazon Q capability, we have all the pro roles that are attached to it, right? So the Reader Pro role allows you to generate executive summaries. You can use the AI-assisted data storytelling, and then your Admin Pro and the Author Pro get enabled for the AI-powered dashboard authoring experience, all using natural language. So you can actually build visuals, build calculations, and even refine visuals using the natural language itself, right? So with the basic roles, you add the Amazon Q capability to get all the pro roles. And this is as of today, right? Coming in the future month, some of these will change, but this is as what we have today. Moving on to the different authentication mechanisms for QuickSight. So QuickSight, you can have users that are managed within QuickSight itself. You can connect it to an IAM. Then we actually have IAM Identity Center as first party integrated with QuickSight. So you can use that for your authentication and authorization. And we also support AWS managed Microsoft Active Directory using the AD connector. Or if you have your own IDP, you can use the SAML single sign-on using whether it's Okta, Big Federate. You can bring in your own IDP and connect it with QuickSight through Federation. So when you sign up for QuickSight, as I mentioned before, these are the 4 options that you get as of today. So you can use the federated identities along with QuickSight managed users, or just use the federated identities only, then the Active Directory and the IAM Identity Center as first party. So when you sign up, this is the screen that you see that you have to choose when you're actually subscribing for a QuickSight account. Moving on, so just to cover the IAM Identity Center a little bit in detail. So as of last year, we actually enabled IAM Identity Center as first party connectivity to QuickSight. So that enables that if you have your own IDP, you can connect that to IAM Identity Center, and so your users and group can sync with IAM Identity Center, and then IAM Identity Center is connected to QuickSight as first party, right? So you don't have to manage it multiple places. You can manage it in your own IDP, and then everything syncs together, right? Or you can use your IAM Identity Center as a single sign-on, so you can have it federate through your provider through using IAM roles, and that can connect to QuickSight, right? So it can be used both as first party or just use for single sign-on. That difference is and when you should use both, and Neeraj will be covering that in a little bit more in detail about the advantages of using IAM Identity Center, what benefits you get while you use IAM Identity Center as first party. So before we start the data governance, we should quickly understand what are the different assets within QuickSight itself. So you have your enterprise data. It can be in multiple data sources. So the first step is creating a QuickSight data source. Once you create a QuickSight data source, your authors and admins both can create the data source. You start building the assets, right? So from the data set, you can actually build a data set. And from that, the data set can be used to build multiple analysis. Yeah. And then you can actually leverage themes if you have custom themes that your dashboard or your company leverages certain UI themes that need to be built. You can actually build those themes and attach it to the analysis. And then you can publish the dashboard for your end users to consume. We have templates too. If you want to use CI/CD to migrate to different, we can use templates as one of the mechanisms. We have different other mechanisms to migrate to a different account, but we can have templates. We can use templates to create the analysis and use that for the CI/CD process. And then you can also create topics for natural language. And all of these different assets can be grouped together within folders. We have different types of shared folders that we use, and we're covering that in detail towards the later part of the webinar. Okay. So once you have all these folders organized, then your readers can basically get insights from dashboards, or they can ask questions using the topics. Moving on to the different types of data sources that we support within QuickSight. So QuickSight offers several sources for data, and that may be native to Amazon Web Services, which is Athena, Redshift, or the S3 Simple Storage Service. QuickSight can also connect to your data on-prem or to other cloud providers like Google BigQuery, Azure Synapse, or also to different SaaS providers like Salesforce, Jira, or GitHub and ServiceNow. So these are some of the different data sources that you connect, and I'll show you a quick demo on the native connectivity that we offer through QuickSight 2. So once you connect to a data source and create a data source, then you can create a data set. And for the data sets, we actually offer 2 query modes, right? So one is the direct query mode, which is the live connection to your data source. So if you have use cases like a real-time use case, you have data sources that basically are not supported by our capacity for Spice, right? So Spice is our in-memory, super fast in-memory calculation engine, and that can support up to 2 billion rows and 1 terabyte of data. It is very, very fast since we have our own proprietary engine that we built. We can join multiple federated data sources, like if you have Athena, Redshift, or Snowflake, you can bring all together different tables and you can join that within Spice, right? So, and then you can actually do batch updates that we'll cover a little bit in detail later on. with Spice itself, right? So two different query modes, the in-memory, that's Spice, and the direct query modes. Based on your use case, you make the right choice on what you want to use. Okay. So as mentioned before, so Spice basically as an in-memory calculation engine, it supports full and incremental data refreshes both for your SQL data sets. You can set up a refresh interval up to 15 minutes or higher. You can then schedule the Spice refresh either in the UI or with our APIs. You can use basically the create ingestion APIs to enable event-based data-driven refresh requirements. So both through the UI or through the API, you can configure all these refreshes in different frequencies. Okay. So moving on to the demo. So we'll quickly show you what are the different types of connectivity modes that we have with datasets, how you can do dataset versioning within QuickSight itself, how these data assets are used, where it's being used, then the permissions, and then how you can configure the incremental and full refresh, right? So this is the first demo, and then moving on, needed to be showing the other parts of demo itself, right? Let me bring up my console. So for folks who are seeing QuickSight for the first time, when you log into QuickSight, this is our console. On the left-hand side, you can see that we have the top section in which you use to organize all the contents. You have your favorites, you have recent assets that you have accessed. My folders is all your content that you are creating and that you want for yourself. And then shared folders is basically way of organizing your assets that your team or organizations can use to share the different assets. Below over here are our different assets within QuickSight itself. So we have data sets, analysis. These two are scenarios of agentic AI capability. And then we have topics for a natural language, and then stories to create a narrative form of presentation, right? And then dashboards for our end users to use. So there's different assets out here. And this is how we organize our different content. So starting with data sets, the first step, as we mentioned, is being able to connect to your data. So if I click on data sets, you'll see I have different data sets that I have. Anything that is labeled as Spice, which is in memory engine, and this is stored in memory, right? Anything which is not mentioned as Spice means this is direct query, right? So it's the live connection to my data source, and then it's connecting to your database and using your database resources to get information and then putting it to QuickSight. Okay, so I'll create a new data set. Okay, this is where I can actually create a new data source. So I mentioned we support all of these different data sources as native connectors. So you have Redshift, you have S3, Athena, Postgres, we have Snowflake, we have Google BigQuery, and all of these have their own mechanisms of connectivity. Some of them use username password, some of them use the two-legged OAuth, some of them use the three-legged OAuth, right? So I have different connectivity mechanisms, and we'll be going a little bit more in detail towards the latter part of the webinar on how each of these data sources are connected, right? So I have some data source that I've created from before. This is my Athena data source called demo QM. If I click on edit data source, you'll see basically the connectivity parameters that are required. This one just requires the name and member group. For this data source, I've actually attached a restricted folder, right? So restricted folders are a special type of folders that we have in QuickSight. We will cover that in more detail. So if you have requirements for organizing your assets or in a single folder, not letting your end users move any of the assets, which is the dataset analysis or your dashboards outside of a folder, then you attach a data source to a restricted folder, and then all the users who have access to that data source will be forced to put all the assets within the restricted folder itself. Okay. So I'll quickly show how you create a data set from a data source. So once you've connected, this is my Athena, so I have access to all of these different tables. I'll connect to a QM demo. Once connect to the schema, then I can connect to a table within the schema itself, right? Click on edit preview. So this is our current data prep. We also have a new data prep, a new experience data prep that you see over here on the right side that we'll be launching pretty soon. That is currently in beta right now. It's in private preview beta. But this is what we have today. So you see we have all the metadata on the left hand side. You can see a preview of your data that is there. You can actually bring in multiple data sources by clicking add data from your. Below you can see we have the direct query mode, and the spice mode, right? So I can switch this to spice mode so that this becomes in memory, and I can do save and publish. And since I have this data source attached to a restricted folder, you see that I'm getting an option to basically select that only restricted folder that I'm there, right? If I don't have it attached to a restricted folder, it won't prompt you. It will show, save it in the default folder for QuickSight. Okay, then I say add. Okay, so it says refresh is in progress. The refresh for this data set now has started and it's putting it in memory. Okay, so once we do that, we can come over here and click on manage. You can actually see the publishing history. So this is how we do dataset versioning on QuickSight. So since I just published this, this shows this is my active version, and this is the first version that I have. Okay, so now what I can do is I have my metadata. Using this, I can do different things within the metadata. I can go ahead and add it to a folder so we can organize the metadata in different folders. I can edit the name and description. I can actually change the data type. So over here, I can see that my order date is in string format. I actually want it in a date format. So I can change the data type to a date. And I'll get a preview over here. Okay. I can actually exclude certain columns that I don't want to be part of my authoring experience. You can do that also by setting the exclude field. I can only add calculations, filters, and even parameters that can be used within datasets, right? Since I've changed this to a date format now, let me go ahead and save it one more time. It prompts me for the restricted folder. Add. Now, if I go back and look at my publishing history, you see that now I have two versions, and this one became my current version, right? So if I want to revert back to a previous version, right, I can always go back and revert it, do a preview before that, and revert to a previous version. So this is how we do dataset versioning within QuickSight itself. Okay, so now since we published the data source, it's in Spice. Go back to the dataset page itself to show you other different properties of the dataset. This is the one that's created a few minutes before. Okay. So when you click on the dataset, it opens up the properties for the dataset. Right? It says that the refresh is in progress currently. Okay. You'll see different options needed. We're covering the row security and column security. When I click on the permissions, it'll show me the different users and groups that have access to it, right? The usage, right? Since it's a new data set, I haven't used it anywhere else. Right now, it doesn't show me, but if I have it used in different analysis and dashboard, when I start creating it, it will start showing up on the data set usage, right? As I mentioned before, so anytime we actually make a modification to the data set, it triggers a manual refresh by itself. Once the data set is ready and you want to schedule it to automatically run the refresh, you can do that by adding a new schedule. We can do a full refresh. So this basically runs the complete refresh of your Spice data set, and you can schedule that for different frequencies. If you want to configure an incremental refresh, you can configure that. It needs a date column. So right now I only have one order date column. So it'll be use that date to look back for the look back window, right? So I can say I want to look back 5 days. So what this will actually do is based on the order date, it will do a -5 on the order date, and it will remove that data for the last 5 days and put in the new fresh data for the last 5 days. And that's how incremental refresh will work. Once you've configured that, then I can configure the schedule, right? So this is basically how you do incremental and full refreshes within the data set itself. Okay. Now, I pass it over to Neeraj to continue with the webinar. Neeraj, over to you.
Everyone, let's focus on the different aspects. As Salim has called it out, I will now spend time on the row level security and column level security. So data authorization is key aspects. So let's explore how to empower your team with self-service analytics, and while you may want to maintain the tight control over the data access. So we can create a centralized managed data sets with like the way Salim has highlighted, like you can just create a one data sets, and in that data sets, if you wanted to perform any kind of a joint, and also you can just build that particular centralized data sets, and on that, from there onwards, you can have your customized dashboard, and then you can provide your dashboard views for different users and roles. And then you can implement a role and column level security to ensure the data governance, and while enabling any automatic refreshes. As Salim was highlighting, you can do a full refresh or incremental refresh to keep your insights very current. So with that, let me switch to the console and to showcase these capabilities through a quick demo. So as you see in my console, like I have a share folders. Let me go into that particular one. That's just a demo sales folder that I have built in here. And with this, I have a data set which has been used to create analyses. And then from there, I published a one dashboard, right? And the data that I have is basically a SaaS sales data, again, a sales data for a fictitious marketing company for its products and everything. So when I look into the dashboard, you would see that I can see, as a owner of this particular dashboard, I can see that I have a sales by different regions and other key metrics that I wanted to take a look at it. Now, I can share this dashboard maybe on the folder, or I can share this particular dashboard's permissions to other users. I can share it to Salim and all other users within my org, right? Or I can just apply that permission that the folder level itself. I have now just shared it with another test users, which is a business analyst user who has access to and has a viewer permission on this particular dashboard. Let me log into that particular user and show you like what the current business analyst, as a business analyst, what the view looks like. So as I log into the same account, QuickSight account, as a different user, the logged in, this user has in principle the same dashboard accessible. And as I look into this particular dashboard, I have the same view. I can also see all the different views. Now, I wanted to apply the role level security. I wanted to set certain rules, like the certain user should be able to see a certain specific regions also, right? For that, I can go into I can build a rule data sets. It's easy to build, like same way, like as Salim was showing it, you can just create a rule data sets, and you can apply you can have those data rules created, like which particular user should see what particular fields or attributes or the values within that. So I have my data set which has a region in the field. So let me go back to that data set as well and show you what does that data set has quickly. So within my same folder, I have this particular data sets. As you could see, within this particular data sets, I have access, I have all the order details, and these order details confined to our different regions, right? So region is one of my attributes, and which I wanted to use it for applying the row level security. Certain users can see a certain region. So I have three different regions: EMEA, as you have seen, EMER, and APJ, and these are the ones I will use it for restricting that or applying the row level security upon. So as part of my rules, I have Neeraj can see all the data, and I have defined a rule for Salim to basically see only the MEI and APJ, and there's a business analyst user who can see only the MR data, right? So that's the rule data set that I have created for now, and for just for the demo purpose, I have just uploaded the file and created that. But you can just create it in principle. You can create it in your within your data set. You can have all your rules defined, and you can as it gets refreshed or the user gets added to it, these tables can get refreshed, and then you can use that to apply the row level security. So let's say, assuming you have this particular rule data sets, and then going back, like once you have the rule data sets available, I can go back and apply the rule data sets security on my the main data sets. So which is my SaaS data set. And as Salim was showing you all these options together, one of the options is to apply the row level security or column level security. Let's first focus on how do you set up the row level security. So I can go in and click on the setup and I can say user-based rules. So there are different types of securities that you can have. One is a user-based rules or another is stack-based rules. This is only permitted when you don't manage the users within QuickSight, and in that case, you are embedding the dashboards, and for that you have to pass those session tags to apply that security for data security. In case, since we are managing these users within QuickSight, so I can go with the user-based rules. I can just select what is my rule data sets, which I have SAS sales, which is the one I was showing you earlier, which has 3 rows for 3 different user personas. And I can say apply this rule data set on this particular data set. On my main dataset. Now, as I go back and look into the datasets, it has RLS enabled, as you would see that. So you can easily indicate that on this particular dataset, the row level security has been applied. Now, the row level security has been applied, and that also has one of the rule as business analysts can see on your respective data for EMEA. And then now I can go back into and see like from my other user, which is I logged in as a business analyst here user, I can refresh my screen as if the user logs in again and then looks into the dashboards, would be able to see the EMER data. Sorry, it was not EMEA, it was EMER data, because that was in the rule that I provided, right? So this particular user can see all the data with respect to the region. Now, can it be extended to further other attributes? Yes, as long as you have those attributes within the data sets. It could be a sub-regions, you can go at the industry or different areas. So you can have all those security applied within, you can put together all these rules, and as the rules are applied, it gets reflected and the user would see as they are supposed to, the data they are authorized to see. So in principle, you have to create a rule datasets and apply to your main datasets. Once it is applied, all your dashboards built out of this, or anytime you have a topics which is more for natural language query, all that gets applied to. So there was a one question from Naman aligning to like, can the row level security be applied to for the Amazon Q in QuickSight? So in that case, yes, if the topics are also built from the same datasets, it can get applied. Now that covers the row level security. Now let me go back and switch. And also you can easily go back and remove this row level security. Let's say if I go and if I wanted to disable that, I can just say user-based rules and turn it off and confirm that. So with that, my row level security will be turned off on that particular dashboard, on particular data sets. Let's focus on the column level security. So that is another options. Right now, there's no restrictions. As I look into all my attributes are accessible here from the data sets. Now, let's say take an example of order ID. I don't want the users, my authors, to know, let's say the customer name. They can see the customer ID, and let's say I wanted to disable the customer name and also the license information. Imagine that it's considering that is more critical, and I wanted to mask that information for my other authors. In that case, I can provide what are the attributes. So in this case, I've selected these 2 attributes to be restricted. A column level security should be applied on these data sets. I can say next, and I can apply now. I can provide the users which will have access to it. For the other users, right now it says all the users have access to these ones. Now I can limit that. Let's say I wanted to apply that for Salim user ID. I want only Salim to access that, and rest all the users should be prohibited. They should be restricted to use these 2 columns, customer and license information. As I say apply, and I go back to my data sets, and let's say as an author, since I'm an author and I have restricted for myself as well, and I'm only allowing Salim to access only those 2 attributes. So when I go into the analysis, these 2 fields should be restricted for me. And I will not be able to pull these information like the license and customer. You might see that these are disabled for me and I cannot further take it down. Okay. Now, let me go back to, so that covers the row level security and column security. And likewise, you can also disable or enable that as it requires, and you can do the data authorizations for your use cases as applicable. Moving on, now let's understand how you would organize and share your content with folders in QuickSight. So using the folders, you can more easily organize, or you can navigate through and discover the dashboards, or you can have the analyses, data sets, data sources, and even the topics as well. So as in this example, you would see that I have a company-wide access, which is as a QuickSight admin, I have created a one folder. And I have added I've now added authors and readers to the respective subfolders. I have created I have a marketing, sales, and finance as three different subfolders. And within that, I can organize one folder for dashboards, one for assets. Likewise, if there's a need for, like for example, for sales, I wanted to define, I want to have a much more classification or deeper classification. Like I wanted to show it by, look at it, manage or organize my assets by different geographies. I can even do now. As I have access, I can give an access for my marketing analysts who are my authors, and I can give an access to all my executives, which will be a reader access I can give. So when the in this example, like when any executives which are, they will be all able to see all the folders, but they won't see any content in any of the assets folders because that is restricted, since these are readers and they can only see the dashboards. And this folder contains only the analyses and data sets. So they would be able to ideally see only the dashboards they have access to. So likewise, you can manage like who should be having access to what particular folders, and all those permissions can be inherited. So you can organize all your content within the folders and the subfolders, and likewise you can put together and share those with the other users within your accounts. Now the requirement comes in, as we have seen, is more of restricting the within the share folders. There are use cases we see that don't want we don't want we want to have the sets restricted so that they cannot be moved out or they cannot be removed from that particular folder. And that is where the restricted folders comes in. These are more specialized type of a share folders to say, and they basically prevent asset removal. And when you combine that with a contributor role, which I will speak about it shortly, so you can automatically restrict the asset sharing permissions. And these folders, they can enable any centralized permission management, and you can do it through the inheritance, where contributors can create or edit or delete these assets, but they cannot modify the folder permissions, or they cannot remove the folder itself. So or admins can create, if we have to create the restrict folders as highlighted. So admin or your admins within your QuickSight accounts, they can go and create the share folders, restricted folders via the APIs. And as these folders are being created and shared, any authors, let's say they start with creating the data sources and within that particular restricted folders, and from there, if they start creating a data sets, analysis, or dashboards, or other scenarios, whatever they create, it will be only restricted to that particular folder only. They will not be able to move that. So, with an understanding of the restricted folders, now let's understand deeply on different types of folders as we can organize our content in QuickSight. One of them is a personal folder, as you might have seen if you have logged into QuickSight, and that is basically it's visible only to the person who owns them, and you can't transfer the ownership of the personal folders to anyone else. Then comes the share folders. Assets can be flexibly organized across the multiple folders and shared by the owners with more permission control at the folder level. And you can have the access control that follows the hierarchical model, which I've shown you just now, like with the finance, marketing, and sales there, and where the assets can inherit the folder permissions. And owners maintain the usage rights across the non-restricted folders. Last one comes the restricted folders. For this type of folders and special type of folders, the assets are, as I've highlighted, are strictly confined to that single restricted folder, meaning the permissions are folder driven and they are inherited. And assets cannot be duplicated across the multiple locations, or can only be used within their designated restricted folders. So these are three different folders, and we will understand like when to use when shortly. Now, on these assets, it's important to understand what kind of a permissions flows in. So asset creators, they become the default owner with full control, and the multiple owners can be also assigned. So you can go in and you can share it with other and make them as an owner. So they can become a co-owner from that, and except in the restricted folders where ownership's rights don't apply. With the viewer permissions, the authors can view the assets in the restricted folders, and in share folders, authors retain that ability to basically they can copy and build from assets, but they can also not add it or move or share them. If the authors need a permissions to edit or delete these assets, then they will require a contributor permissions. However, just to call out, the author as a contributor will not be able to change the permission of assets. So they can delete, edit, but they cannot change the permission of the assets, which the owner of that can do. So those are in the different permissions to keep in mind as we are sharing these with the different users or different groups, and provide the access to at a shared folder level. Now let's understand. We understand the shared folders, restricted folders. For the multi-tenant architectures, how it can work, how you can essentially work it out in QuickSight. So QuickSight, first of all, supports the multi-tenancy, and that is through the namespaces, which is more of a logical container that you can use to organize your own customers or your subsidiaries, or your teams, or maybe any departments within your organizations and so on. So by using the namespace, you are basically you are isolating the QuickSight users and groups that are registered for that namespaces. And users that access that namespace, they can share assets only within their users or groups within the namespaces. They can't see the users and groups in other namespaces. So in a nutshell, namespaces are more useful for anytime you wanted to do a user isolations and define the permissions around that. We have, like, in case you wanted to share the assets, that's so our multi-tenancy also offers the asset visibility. Like, you can share the assets with the different tenants as well. And then you can apply the data security on top of it. So altogether, the user isolation, the asset visibility, and data security is all together bundled up when we say that. So user isolation is all through the namespaces, then sharing, and then the row level security and column level security. As you apply it all together creates that your multi-tenant architecture. Now, question comes in like, when do you go with the restricted folders versus the multi-tenant architecture? So we'll come back to that particular point. So Salim and I have put together that one slide which can differentiate and which can be helpful to understand that as well. So before that, I just wanted to highlight that so multi-tenancy using the namespaces would allow your isolations across the users, as we have spoken about it, and it can support the multiple workloads within the same QuickSight accounts. It can basically allow your data security using a row level security, and you can again restrict the users as needed. Now, all that, there are three ways you can build assets and govern them through the namespaces. One is, like, as a dev team, you can create the standard assets that are shared across the namespaces. Now, on top of it, you can have that's your common assets. You can have the dedicated assets which your team can create, and then you can share these assets with respect to the other teams. There would be a dedicated assets, which, let's say, the customer A, like the dev team wants to create it only and only for the customer B or customer A. That can be created, and each tenant can basically have that access to that, right? There could be a scenario where you would like to create a tenant specific assets. So in that case, the author within each tenant, let's say I'm a user or within the customer A, and as I create my assets or content, I can publish it to my own namespace only. because I am not permitted to access or share anything. I will not be able to visible the customer peak as such, because that's where the isolation comes in. To summarize the namespace, yeah, basically it's preventing all your authors from one tenant from seeing or sharing the content with authors from another tenant, and which is where it is very, very important for multi-tenant authoring. Moving on with that, now let's understand how do you make the decisions when to use a namespace versus, because this question comes very often, so wanted to highlight that. So when you want to use a namespace versus a restricted versus a share folders. So if you need a complete user isolations, you will use a namespaces when users from different groups should never see or interact with each other. In case if the user isolation is not required, and in case when you wanted to prevent the assets from being moved or shared outside the boundary, that is where you will go with the restricted folders. In all other cases, it's better to always organize within the share folders and provide an access, be it as we have seen, you wanted a viewer permission or contributor or owner permissions, you can all apply that within the share folders and share it with your users and organize your content. Moving on now, it's now important to know that we have a centrally enforced data permissions, and that is through IAM Identity Center, or IDCs as we say. So as we configure QuickSight through IDC, all your QuickSight users can basically subscribe to QuickSight using the IDC, and they can enable their users to log in with their existing identity source without even requiring any additional single sign-on configuration into QuickSights. So with IDC, basically you can allow also the trusted identity propagations, which can configure with Redshift. So QuickSight can directly configure with Redshift using the IDC. So that will pass basically the user identity from, let's say if you are using a direct query. So from direct query, Redshift to QuickSights, giving you more seamless end-to-end access, and where you don't need any re-authentication, and basically you will simplify also the row-level security management, all that seamlessly. So your trusted identity propagations can basically navigate and access your Redshift. In other words, like it's more of an internal way of doing a three-legged authentications. Your user identity gets passed into the Redshift and access that particular data for QuickSight user who has logged in and looking into the data insights. How do you enable the enhanced security features? So more to, and you can set up how do you want it to gain the fine-grained access control? So in principle, we have seen for a governance perspective, there are cases where at runtime, you wanted to define your S3 boundaries, like user A when logs in and looks into the dashboard should be able to access the data only in a respective bucket. Let's say it's a North America bucket versus the another user logs in can only access the EMEA bucket. So if there is such kind of a needs, or even you have a data catalogs created with those kind of a data boundaries, so you can use a run as an IAM role in principle, and basically you can use that basically to access the data and set those boundaries and to have the data governance in principle and have the more fine-grained access control. So run as IAM role is also important as we set it up. We just spoke about trusted identity propagations, which is applicable for Redshift, Athena, if you have a data lakes architecture setup, so you can use a trusted identity propagations. Only the caveat is that you would need an identity center setup. So if QuickSight is configured with Redshift, let's say, and with the identity center, you can leverage the trusted identity propagation. In case if you have external authentications, for example, Snowflake. So we currently supported the two-legged authentications where service-to-service authentications without user interactions can be done. And then three-legged approach also is one of the common ask, like we do it essentially for BigQuery and Google Sheets currently. And there are a few more to be added later this year or in the 2026. So we have a plan around for the extending that for some of more data sets where it will be more user-centric authentications. Users will explicitly grant permissions for the applications. Lastly, there are fine-grained access control for specific capabilities in QuickSights, as you would do it through the custom permissions. For example, you have data. You wanted to give. You have your authors within an account, and you wanted to restrict the authors to create the new data sets. Rather, they should be able to only and only view or access the existing data sets or data source which has been given access to them. So you can define that custom permissions, or could be another ways like you wanted to disable export of a CSV or export of a data from your CSV or Excel from your dashboard as the users looks into it. So all that can be permitted through the custom permissions. Like you can set up those rules and restrict those users through the custom permissions. So from data governance perspective, we wanted to highlight that it's very, very important. You can leverage our custom permissions, create your own persona, and then use that to leverage for as they use QuickSights, they will be restricted as you want them intend to be. The last few things to talk about, one is on the encryptions. By default, QuickSight would encrypt your data using a QuickSight owned AWS managed keys. But in addition, if you want to use your own custom managed keys for any SPICE data encryptions, which is SPICE is our super fast in-memory calculation engine, as Salim has called it out, and he has shown like how you has created a data set using the SPICE. So you can leverage those kind of a data sets, the SPICE data sets, where you can encrypt your data source. You wanted to encrypt the data, or you can also encrypt your data source credentials or auth tokens. All that you can achieve it. Again, you can achieve it through the console or the API. So we have set of APIs also available to do that. Just quickly to touch upon, there are a lot of monitoring aspects within QuickSights. So as the data is being accessed and you wanted to basically monitor how the QuickSight data sets is being leveraged or what kind of you wanted to look at the metrics. You can leverage the CloudWatch, basically where you can see the metrics and you can observe and respond to any availability and performance of entirely a QuickSight ecosystem in near real time, and more focused on data. So there are like data set ingestion metrics which are available, which can talk about or showcase like how much, like how many ingestions is executed and what's the status of each one of them. Is there any latency or any error counts for any kind of a data set refresh you are doing it? And you can even set up those kind of alarms, which is very, very important from any data governance perspective. Lastly, just to recap quickly, it's important to implement appropriate governance framework based on your organization needs, and you can effectively scale your QuickSight implementation while maintaining all that through security, usability, and cost efficiency. As highlighted, the first one is scalable authentications, which basically you can choose the right authentication method, which Salim's talked about various methods, and you can pick the one essentially to support your long-term growth plan. Secondly, it's more of like you can implement a group-based access. You can have all your users and group manage them within the groups and align with your use case to simplify more permission management. Anytime the user gets added, you can add it to the respective groups. And then on top of it, you can have those asset organizations where you can have the folder structures, whether it's a share folder or restricted folders you wanted to create, you can then expand it within your organizations. And then lastly, you can just have the like you can build your security model, like which user is authorized to see what kind of a content, applying your row level security, or you can also filter it through the column level securities as needed. And then you can periodically monitor these usage patterns, like how the optimization is going on for respective dashboards or data sets, data that has been used across the dashboards, reports, or your any kind of if you have used a natural language query. So from that perspective, you can always do that. it's important to basically look at any kind of a inactive user management also. So all that can be done from the governance perspective.